When it comes to poorly designed units, I'm sorry to say, but my girl Xinyan is definitely the person I rank highest on that list. However, I am confident that this rework idea will fix some of the prevalent issues in her kit. Hey everyone, welcome back to Unit 2.0. Today's episode will be about Xinyan and how we can improve her game design. We'll cover topics such as her split scaling as well as her playstyle options. In my description, you can find disclaimers, timestamps, social media links, and music credits. You can also find a Discord server link where you can feel free to discuss Genshin or HSR content as well as share some of your own original concepts. So come and join the server if that interests you. Finally, captions are available for anyone who needs them. Without further ado, let's get started. Xinyan has split scaling and split playstyle. Her damage is attack-based, but her shielding is defense-based. She works as an on-field attacker, but an off-field support. Now, it might not be a major issue on the surface. After all, you just build her based on her playstyle. But the main issue lies in that these two mechanics are inherently linked to each other. So instead of you focusing on a playstyle, you end up self-sabotaging your kit. When you build her as a damage dealer, you naturally have less defense for shielding. This inadvertently affects her damage output because the active character gains a 15% physical damage bonus while shielded. But if the shield breaks easily, the bonus will disappear along with it. And if you build her for a stronger shield, you lose out on that personal damage. Sure, it's not that bad to focus on shield support, but a very large chunk of her kit is focused around personal damage, and it would be a waste to toss it all aside. There's also the issue that Xinyan's a pyro user, which has nothing to do with physical damage. Cryo and Electro have better standing for that because of Superconduct, which reduces physical resistance. So it feels a bit out of place for her to have Pyro as an element altogether. Honestly, she could have been Electro, and the Rockstar gimmick would have still made sense, kinda like Serval from HSR. But for this rework, we're not switching her element. I know it makes complete sense to do so, but I still want to challenge myself a little bit. Is it possible to make Xinyan a viable physical unit without disrupting her elemental alignment? And if so, how do we pull that off? The rework will also address other aspects such as her split scaling, and will provide ways to make her dual playstyle a bit more viable and flexible to play around. Now then, let's hop into the rework itself. For the very first thing we'll discuss, it'll be her skill. Right now, when Xinyan casts her skill, she creates a tiered shield based on the amount of enemies hit. This makes it so that in AoE, she generates a stronger shield. If you achieve the maximum tier, she also pulses pyro damage every 2 seconds. This also has no ICD, so it makes her a very strong applicator. But because it's tied to hitting 2 or 3 enemies, her shield is less effective in boss content. The only way you can have this is by using her burst at C2, which automatically generates a level 3 shield. Additionally, her damage is attack scaling while the shield is defense. So, first change on the list? The shield is now a single tier, and it will now have dual scaling. In other words, her shield now scales on both her attack and defense stat. With how I plan to design her, she's gonna now lean more into attack stats, so it'll be similar to Ayato scaling. If you happen to get substats in defense, it won't be completely useless, but you should still try focusing more on attack. I decided to make the scalings as such. The level 1 and 2 shield multipliers will now be added onto the original multiplier, but as attack scaling. At level 8, 362.3% attack and 230.4% defense, plus a flat amount of 3,341. For this calculation example, Xinyan is running White Blind and has a general attack damage crit build. And you can see here that her shield is already hitting around 15,000 HP, which is nearly 60% better than before. Next up, let's look at Xinyan's shield when going all in for attack or defense scaling. Because the multipliers on attack are slightly higher than defense, Xinyan will have a better shield when focusing on attack stats. However, the difference in health is only around 4%, so running defense is still a viable choice. Next up, we'll improve her damage and quality of life mechanics. Now that the shield no longer has the tiers, she will automatically have the pulsing effect. But instead of making her a full physical unit, I wanted to show some love for the people who play Xinyan as some sort of pyro unit, things like Burgeon or that Mualani forward vape setup. So we're gonna add this mechanic. If you tap Xinyan's skill, her shield will now create baseline pulses, and will be pyro damage. Same exact thing as it is now. 2-second intervals, no ICD, so nothing changes in regards to her pyro teams. But if you hold this skill, Xinyan's shield will now instead create heartbeat pulses, dealing physical damage. Because the beat is like a heartbeat, each pulse has a doubled multiplier. I did this since physical needs extra love compared to pyro. Having her deal physical damage not only has a higher multiplier, but it also performs very well in reducing the risk of reactions getting messed up. Regardless of which pulse effect you choose, Xinyan's shield is still pyro aligned. There's also one more thing I wanted to try out. If you decide to hold her skill for the physical playstyle, the active character receives an infusion blocking effect, preventing them from getting any sort of standard infusion. Now, if an ability states the infusion cannot be overridden, such as Hu Tao's state, this does not get blocked, but overridable infusions, such as Ayaka or Keqing, will be affected. The main purpose of this is actually so Xinyan can function with a C6 Bennett. Other physical units don't rely on Bennett supports, since the roster is full of viable alternatives now, but with Xinyan being a pyro unit herself, it's much easier for her to obtain the resonance effect with a second pyro character. So this infusion blocker means you can play her as a physical carry, even if Bennett is C6. And if you choose to play her as a shield support, other physical carries can use this blocker. But keep in mind, using this synergy results in only one free slot for another support, which might not be flexible enough for some of the physical teams out there. So with this rework, we create 4 unique playstyles for Xinyan. First is a Pyro On-Fielder. Since Xinyan will not receive her own infusion ability, this is only really viable with a C6 Bennett to infuse her auto attacks. However, her pulses will deal pyro damage on their own. Second is a Physical On-Fielder. The physical shield blocks infusions, should one pop up, and you can play her for her physical autos and the pulsing effect. Third is a Pyro Off-Fielder, which allows her to set up or trigger reactions with the pulse. Once again, things like Burgeon or forward vape setups. Finally, a Physical Off-Fielder, capable of being the first character to specialize in off-field physical damage, as well as acting as a shield support for the actual on-fielder. The use of her physical off-fielding is that the pulses won't negatively affect elemental reactions, making her extremely reliable in teams that have strict application rules. Overall, this change to Xinyan's kit allows her to continue functioning as a pyro or physical related unit, kinda like how Feminine can choose between cryo and physical. But because she has the shielding mechanic, it unlocks a new layer to her choices as either an on-fielder or off-fielder. We should also make the shield uptime better. Rather than making the shield last longer, I think we'll just make the cooldown shorter. Instead of 18 seconds, it'll be 15. This will not only work to improve her uptime, but it'll make her skill fit a much better in a 15-second rotation. Now, because her skill no longer has the tier mechanic, her current A1 becomes pointless. For this change, I want to shift her current A4 forward, and then rework that a little bit. Xinyan's new A1 is that instead of the shielded character getting a 15% physical damage bonus, it's just 15% damage bonus. Since Xinyan's new flexible role works for both physical or elemental units, giving her a universal bonus is better. Moving on to her burst, there isn't much I have to say in regards to a rework. Maybe a multiplier buff for starters, but in terms of a viable change to work with her playstyle choice, let's try this. By default, Xinyan's initial burst hit will deal pyro damage alongside its smaller pyro hits. This fits her a lot better if you're looking to play her in a pyro-focused team. If you have the shield active and it's in its physical pulsing mode, then the hit will be as it is currently, a large physical hit with smaller pyro hits. This is a smaller quality of life change to give the player assurance in their builds and playstyles. So maybe if you choose to run her as a pyro carry, that initial burst hit for pyro can work as like a forward melt. For additional buffs, we could make the burst cooldown 12 seconds and the energy cost as 40 energy, but I'm not too fussed about keeping the cost at 60 because this ability is more bonus damage than anything else. Her new A4 is going to be a new mechanic that's more of an experimental thing. For 9 seconds after using her burst, 30% of Xinyan's crit damage stat is converted into a crit damage bonus for other party members, not including herself. The bonus will max out at 36% crit damage. When you play her as a main DPS or an off-fielder, you can rest assured that your other party members get a nice bonus. The scaling makes it easy so that she caps out at 120% crit damage, which should be relatively easy to achieve for a standard crit ratio build. So let's say you have her on-field as a Pyro Vaporized carry. Xingqiu or Yelan can now get a nice crit damage bonus for their off-field damage. An on-fielder like Eula or Arlecchino will also be able to benefit from the bonus, should Xinyan instead be an off-fielder. So why did I choose a bonus like this? Number 1, I always found it interesting that Xinyan's C2 had her burst deal a guaranteed crit hit. It made me question whether there was some kind of incentive to build her for more crit damage, and I wanted to play around with that idea a little bit more. Number 2, a lot of players associate crit with cryo, and the same kind of holds true for me. However, for some odd reason, I like to associate crit rate with cryo a lot more than crit damage. When it comes to pyro, there's the natural attack association, but I also feel like crit damage works as a secondary association. Maybe it's because crit rate and damage are polar opposites, and then on the elemental side, cryo and pyro are most likely opposites. Once again, the connection is a bit of a loose string, but I like the idea that if we get a crit damage focused unit, they would be pyro instead of cryo. Next up is the Constellation rework. We have quite a few changes here, since we're shifting Xinyan into a dual playstyle role. Her original C1 increases attack speed when scoring a crit hit. Since you might choose to now play her off-field, we need to accommodate that playstyle. Upon scoring a crit hit, attack speed will still be increased by 15%. However, in addition to that, the interval cooldown between skill pulses will decrease by 15%. This isn't a massive change from the original, but it allows for a total of 7 pulses instead of 6. For Pyro, it means faster Burgeon procs or faster Pyro application. For Physical, it just means more damage. For her C2, I'm taking away the shield generation from casting her burst, since it already has better uptime from the base rework, but we'll be sure to replace it with something of better or equal value. The burst crit rate will still be increased by 100%, as it currently is, but if you have a standard crit ratio build, the extra crit rate suddenly becomes useless for the ability. So now, when casting her burst, all of Xinyan's current crit rate becomes a burst crit damage bonus. This allows the excess crit rate to still be useful. Now, keep in mind, burst crit damage bonus is a non-snapshotable effect and is a separate bonus from regular crit damage, so you can't use her C2 to buff her A4's crit damage bonus for the team. Moving on, her original A4 created a Red Shred effect when casting her skill, but knowing how strong enemies have been lately, I want to shift into a more defensive ability to maintain shield uptime. We'll take an approach similar to Lanyan's ability. When the active character deals pyro or physical damage, the shield regenerates 40% of its max health. This can occur once every 2 seconds, and the HP of the shield will not stack above its max health. When it comes to an off-field Xinyan, you are definitely going to find some comfort in playing her with units who specialize in those elements. It's a way to ensure her pulses and the shield maintain its full uptime. However, for an on-field Xinyan, you don't have to worry about her team at all. Because the effect only states it has to be the active character, Xinyan's own pyro and physical damage in an on-fielding role will count towards a shield regen. One of the things I wanted to maintain with Xinyan is that her pulses are still reliant on the shield being active, so providing a way to keep it up and running was very important for both offensive and defensive potential. Finally, her C6. This initially reduced stamina consumption of charge attacks, and while using those very attacks, her attack increased based on 50% of her defense. Limiting the attack bonus to just her charge attacks was an extremely poor move, because no one really uses that ability in the first place. So instead, let's make it a bit more versatile. We can keep the stamina bonus because it's a nice quality of life buff, but in terms of her damage, while her shield is active, she gains an attack buff equal to 50% of her defense. In the base rework, I made so that her shield now has dual scaling on attack and defense, but I didn't touch the damage part of her kit, so pre-C6, she's still a pure attack scaler. With her C6, every aspect of her kit is now technically dual scaling. I did a bit of a calculation with her damage before and at C6. With an attack sans, her damage is 37% better than before. With defense sans, the damage is around 32% better. The numbers are relatively close to one another, which makes your choice of a sans mainly dependent on substats. But in general, attack is going to be the better option. Now that we covered her overall rework, we can discuss how she gets affected in her builds and teams. For a physical playstyle, Pale Flame is definitely a lot more reliable, since Xinyan guarantees that pulsing effect, instead of having to jump through loopholes to get the level 3 shield, so you can choose that over the 2-piece combos. Running White Blind also has a general overall buff, now that the attack and defense dual scale her entire kit, especially at C6. For the most part though, her usual builds remain just as viable. For teams, Things also stay relatively the same, but the changes we implemented now create much more convenience. The usage of her being a pyro applicator now has much better standing because her shield will guarantee pyro pulsing and has much better uptime and health. In an on-field physical team, she can function with a C6 Bennett, which helps the pyro resonance take effect without disrupting that playstyle in the process. The mechanic of a physical damage pulse also means certain reaction teams won't get messed up. A Hu Tower Arlecchino team won't have messed up vaporizes. You can also choose to play her in Superconduct teams, and the physical res shred makes her personal damage better. Alright, that's gonna do it for this video. Overall, this rework achieves its goal. We maintain her current team options, but now, every single one has improved functionality, which makes her much more reliable. While she can function in non-pyro teams through the physical playstyle, she's definitely going to have better synergy in pyro and physical-based teams. You can play her with a damage-oriented build instead of full attack or defense, and her shield is still a massive upgrade compared to before. Essentially, you can run a single build knowing that her viability will remain consistent in all aspects. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. Let me know in the comments what you liked about this rework and what you would change. And once again, if you're interested, consider joining my Discord server. Link in the description. Thanks again for watching everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye!